The second round of rookie picks are all over the place right now. Everybody's got different rankings, but what we're doing is trading our second round rookie picks. If you guys are contenders, this is from the buyer's mindset, for veteran production pieces or other young players that can accumulate value. So, what we are looking to do in today's video is break down the second round, kind of where the tier breaks are in 2025 rookie drafts, and then maybe taking some of those picks and trading them for veterans if that's what you guys are keen on doing. So, we're going to kick things off with the 201 to 204. In the first round pick video, we did mention that the 201 to 204 is kind of an extension of that like 112 range, where you and I both have Caleb Johnson, Luther Burden, RJ Harvey, Jackson Dart, and Jaden Higgins ranked respectively. So given that those are the names that you're looking at in terms of what you would be picking if you stuck and picked at 201, 202, 203, and 204, what are some of the names that we could trade for on the veteran market if, for example, you lucked into that pick, it wasn't your selection, and you're going to add pieces to your dynasty roster to try and compete?
Yeah, and full disclaimer before I get into this range, the 201 specifically is one I would be hesitant to trade, given the fact that I am extremely ahead of the market currently on Luther Burden. Luther Burden is a guy I view as a top 24 level dynasty wide receiver. So Luther Burden specifically is a guy that I would need an overpay in order to be willing to trade. Like I would need to be maybe in one of the vets that we talked about in the first round video to be willing to trade him. I have him ranked at 112 right now. I'm very aggressive on him at the wide receiver position. However, if we're talking about the other names there, Caleb Johnson, RJ Harvey, Jackson Dart, Jaden Higgins, specifically in the 201, 202 range, I think it's pretty simple. RJ Harvey, Caleb Johnson, the main running backs there. If you're a competing team, maybe you ship them over for a guy like Derrick Henry. I understand Derrick Henry's shelf life is very short. In fact, we're usually not the advocates for buying, short-term, immediate production like a Derrick Henry type. However, if you are in a championship push, maybe you're a top 4 level team, top 3 level team, and you want that significant top 5, top 6 level running back upside boost, Derrick Henry still has it. Tethered to this elite Ravens offense, he still looked like the king himself last year. He's still in contention to be one of the top 2 or 3 running backs in the league. And I think I'd be comfortable spending an early to mid second rounder if that's the cost to be able to go and get him.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And Christian McCaffrey, we talked about her in that 111, 112 range. We did
Similar
also
case.
mention Derrick Henry as well. You should be able to get in the range of these guys. Maybe you'd have to throw in like a third round pick or something if you guys are in more like veteran contending heavy leagues. Again, this is going to differ league to league, as we said in the first 2 videos, but I do think Derrick Henry makes quite a bit of sense at that range. And same goes for the other 2 guys that you have listed here, Davante Adams and Mike Evans, both competitive receivers from like, with all 3 of the guys that you have here, you just have to think about the redraft projection. Davante Adams going to be the number 2 alongside Puka Nacua, playing with Matthew Stafford, probably going to have a good production window. He also was just as good as he always was, especially down the back half of the season with the Jets last year. And then Mike Evans is an automatic 1,000 yards every single year.
Yeah, exactly. When you're looking at their ADPs over on Underdog Fantasy, you see with Derrick Henry, 13th overall ADP, 1-2 term pretty much at that point. In terms of Davante Adams and Mike Evans specifically, you have Davante Adams listed here. Let me take a look. Davante Adams. Mike Evans is at wide receiver 19. Davante Adams is at wide receiver 18. Both back-end third-round picks. So when you're talking about just straight point equity, obviously like we've seen with Mike Evans, straight 1,000 yards, touchdown equity for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Baker Mayfield career year this past year. And then specifically, like we said, for the situation now, obviously Davante Adams going to the LA Rams, big time bump to his potential contender status and what should be a very consolidated target share between him and Puka Nacua. But we'll go over to your guys because I mentioned a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. You have a different Tampa Bay Buccaneer listed here. Take it away with your boy, Chris Godwin. So for reference, Evans more so in that 204 range. I'm assuming Godwin, you'd be willing to pay even 201, 202?
Yeah, so obviously you and I differ a little bit on Luther Burden's evaluation. We have him, I don't know, 10, 12 spots apart in Dynasty wide receiver
14,
rankings.
I think.
Yeah, just because I am very risk averse when it comes to Luther Burden to some degree, because I think the compounding risk factor of his profile, then also the compounding risk factor of where he landed, that makes me a little bit more bearish on
different philosophies on it, I would say, because you like the steady, mid-20s, like wide receiver 2 archetypes. For me personally in that range, like really like 18 on, it's so close that I would just rather the upside of a guy like Burden. So it's just based on your preference. You want a guy that's going to step into your lineup and produce day one. Maybe you're a little bit lower on Burden. If you're like me and you want the upside, especially in more shallow leagues, I'm perfectly comfortable reaching on Burden if that's what we were calling it.
Yeah, exactly. And Godwin, Terry McLaurin, and Chuba Hubbard. I think one thing that's a little bit different from the guys that I picked versus the guys that you picked is I like the 2 to 3 year window guys, even if, like, let's say the immediate projection of one of the dudes that you have, Derrick Henry over Chuba Hubbard, for example, is better year one production. I like getting contending assets that aren't going to be completely, irrelevant or fade into oblivion a year from now. So with Chris Godwin, again, he's the younger of the two Buccaneers wide receivers. He is turning 30 this year and he is coming off an ankle injury. But when he was on the field, there was very few wide receivers more dominant on a per game basis in fantasy. Even though they drafted Emeka Egbuka, I think Chris Godwin's recovery is going just fine. We've heard Jason Light say that. And we know that the Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield are going to just air the ball out like crazy. And Chris Godwin is basically the skeleton key to this offense, an offense that still has the same pass game coordinator and third down play caller in Josh Grizzard, who is going to feature Chris Godwin a lot because it is basically third down and Godwin anytime we get into a third down situation. Terry McLaurin, again, he is 30 years old. We talked about him. This might confuse some people because we talked about him as a sell in yesterday's video, but we were saying if you can sell him
Same with
as
McLaurin.
a rebuilder for a late first round pick, that's different than buying him as a contender for an early second round pick. The projection's pretty good. I mean, he had his best season of his career last year, and Jaden Daniels maybe could only get better. Maybe he'll have a sophomore slump, but I think I feel pretty good about buying a guy like Terry McLaurin, knowing that Deebo Samuel was the only major competition added. They don't really operate in the same area of the field. So I like McLaurin as a really solid buy if you're a contending team needing a wide receiver, especially in the leagues that you and I play in, start 9, 10, 11, 12, wide receiver heavy leagues. McLaurin and Godwin make a lot of sense.
Also, sorry, my apologies. I said same with McLaurin. I thought I meant to say same with Henry because we did talk about him yesterday as well, but there's context to every situation. If you're rebuilding, you don't need these type of players. But guess what? You're watching this video probably because you're a contender willing to buy on some cheap veterans that can give you production. Because at the end of the day, there's a difference between implied market value a year from now, which if you're a rebuilding team is what you should be valuing, versus the production value you can get in the calendar year.
Yeah, obviously production is going to factor into market value regardless if you're contending or rebuilding, but especially when you're buying an asset that's 28, 29, 30 years old like McLaurin and Godwin are, they are all production. Like whatever the production they give you is how their market value is going to go. And same goes for Chuba Hubbard because last year he was RB 13 in fantasy points per game. Right now he's going in about the running back dead zone, about the 4th, 5th round on Underdog, 57.
Interesting range for him, by the way. He was very good last year.
He was, yeah. He was like a Pro Bowl running back last season. And Jonathan Brooks is going to be on the mend probably the entire year. They brought in Rico Dowdle and Trevor Etienne, pretty low value investments relative to what they're paying Chuba Hubbard. So even though I would say he kind of does fit the description of like he's like a 1-year projection as far as what you think you're getting out of Chuba Hubbard, he's still only 26 years old. It's not like he's going to fade into oblivion a year from now if Jonathan Brooks is back, if whatever the case is happens in this Panthers backfield. And generally speaking, I think this offense is going to take a step forward. I'm high on Tedero McMillan. I'm high on Bryce Young. I'm, somewhat bullish on Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker at their cost. So I feel pretty good just about this offense in totality. And Chuba Hubbard was the engine of it even last year when the team was bad and couldn't score points for the first half of the season. Chuba Hubbard was still like an elite fantasy running back, even despite that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, considering how bad that offense was, like you said, for the beginning portion of last year, we already project the offense to be better going into 2025. Obviously, they add Ted McMillan, Bryce Young maybe stepping into his own second year of that Canales offense. I really do think, yeah, sure, Rico Dowdle had a really good year in Dallas. He's still going to be a complimentary back, in my opinion. Yeah, they draft Trevor Etienne, going to be a complimentary back. Realistically, Chuba Hubbard should still be maybe he's not a 20-plus opportunity per game guy, but 17 to 18 efficient touches a game is probably what you're barking for.
Yeah, it's crazy when you look back at Chuba Hubbard's game logs. This is a wild stat. In every single game but one last year, after Chuba Hubbard really took over the starting role in week 3, he scored a touchdown even despite Carolina scoring less than 15 points. So he was legitimately the whole offense for a good portion of last year. And then when you look at the games, they actually performed well. I mean, the final game that we saw of Chuba Hubbard before he went out with injury in week 15, he had 25 for 152 and 2 touchdowns, 4 receptions for 13 yards against Atlanta in his final game of the season. So you're looking at a dude that legitimately, when the offense was good and they actually were able to score points, was like a dominant fantasy running back.
Yeah, no, he was very productive. He was a league winner for a lot of people last year. The fact that he was going, 12th, 13th round and a lot of leagues at that point, obviously We were personally optimistic on Jonathan Brooks, but either way we sliced it, the opportunity was there for a Carolina's Panthers running back to be very productive. Chuba Hubbard grabbed the horns and ran with it. We can go on now, though, to the 205, 210. Talked about, 6 veterans over there in the 201 to 204 range. 205 to 210, we got Byshell Tootin, Jalen Milroe, Cam Scadaboo, Kyle Williams, Jack Bech, Trey Harris. And I do have Samson in this range, but by our consensus, he would be in the next year, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah, and with all those guys, you're getting something different. Obviously, with the quarterback, Jalen Milroe, you're taking the upside swing on the fact that he could be a starter, and obviously he's a rushing threat, so he would be extremely valuable for fantasy. With Tootin and Scadabo, you're taking shots on two guys that I think we have both ranked in like the mid-20s, late 20s of our dynasty running back rankings. We believe in the talent of the players. They were both my 6 and 7 coming out in the running back class. And then you have Kyle Williams, Jack Bech, and Trey Harris, who were all day 2 picks, immediate opportunity in front of them to be the number 2 or better in their offense right away in terms of the wide receiver position. So if you're giving up, hypothetically, that pick, you probably want somebody, if you're a contender, that's going to give you pretty significant needle moving production. Or, and I have a couple guys listed here that are just better young players that are available for this price tag. So Aaron Jones, Matthew Stafford, and Mark Andrews, I can group together because they're all contending assets. Aaron Jones, 1 to 2 year projection for the Vikings. They gave him a 2-year extension. Matthew Stafford just signed a 2-year extension yesterday. He's probably not going to be in the league much longer than that, but he's going to give you probably low-end QB1, high-end QB2 production for the next 2 seasons. And then with Mark Andrews, there was rumors he might get traded. That could still happen for sure. But I do think of the 2 tight ends on Baltimore, I still prefer Andrews from like a short-term redraft perspective. So with all 3 of those guys, if you needed a running back and you don't want to wait for Tootin to develop or you don't want to wait for Scadabo to develop, you could take Aaron Jones and just take that production. If you needed a quarterback, you don't want to take the risk that Jalen Milroe becomes Malik Willis, you could just grab Matthew Stafford if you needed a third quarterback. Mark Andrews, you don't want to take the risk on, I mean, this is a little earlier than like the Mason Taylor range or whatever, but if you just wanted a tight end, like let's say you had a really competitive roster, like for example, my team in No Flockin, really competitive roster, but Dalton Kincaid's my starting tight end right now. I could send away a 208, 209, 210 type of pick for a guy like Mark Andrews, because that's apparently what he's available for on the open market. Maybe in your specific league, he goes for higher than that, but according to expert rankings, keep trade cut and all that kind of stuff, this is about the range that you can get, a low-end tight end 1 projection like Andrews.
Yeah. Also, you do have an offer out there for George Kittle if you do want to get the tight end. But all jokes aside here, I completely agree. In this range, these veteran producers, realistically, if you need a quarterback 3 that could potentially step in as your quarterback 2, like you said with Stafford, I view that the same with a guy like Geno Smith. Geno Smith obviously going to the Raiders. They add obviously Ash and Genty, have fortified a bit the offensive line, added another weapon in the draft. We mentioned, funny enough, that Jack Bech is in his range. Well, instead of taking Jack Bech the receiver, you could just get his quarterback if you're a quarterback needy team. For the most part, the reason why you'd be going after a Geno Smith after a Matthew Stafford is assuming that Jackson Dart is off the board at this point. Maybe you're in the draft, you need a quarterback 3. If Dart doesn't make it to this 205 range, trading for a veteran that we know can give you top 15, top 16 weekly type of production, definitely valuable. Calvin Ridley is another veteran. Obviously, the uptick in value with Cam Ward coming in first overall pick. They do add Tyler Lockett, but they also don't add a receiver in the second round. I love Elikayo Manor, but there's a big difference between if they took him at the top of the second round versus in the 4th round. I do think he will carve out a role on this team, but especially in terms of immediate year 1, it's tough for me to envision a 4th round rookie really supplanting Calvin Ridley. I think Calvin Ridley specifically in redraft is going to be a guy I'm all over in the mid-single digit rounds, round 5, round 6 area. I'd be perfectly comfortable taking Calvin Ridley. So if you can get him basically for equatable value of this rookie range, I definitely would be going after Ridley. You mentioned the tight end there with Mark Andrews. I got a couple more here. If you can get a guy like Tucker Kraft, a guy like David
I would say stick to Njoku just because we're talking veterans first, and then we can talk about Kraft, Benson, Downs, and Reed as guys that are younger that we could buy into.
Yeah, so we'll talk about the young guys in a second. David Njoku specifically, I mean, he's been a rock-solid top 5 level point per game tight end for the last few years, gets a ton of targets, improving Browns offense. I mean, he's just a staple. Anytime he's healthy, he's the clear fulcrum of this Browns passing attack.
And if he was healthy all the time, he would probably be way higher than this. Like you could argue that he's over, a George Kittle or somebody like that, but he was literally tight end 4 in fantasy points per game last year. And you don't see that not being valued as like a late first round type of asset. That's needle moving production, tight end 4 in points per game. The only problem is he missed 6 games last year, doesn't really have a good quarterback situation, and the Browns drafted Harold Fannin in the 3rd round. So we don't exactly know what the long-term appeal is for David Njoku. It's possible that year 1, year 2, he's still with the Browns and maybe they move on from him because they drafted Fannin or something like that. Regardless, I mean, he's only 29 years old. They're not even 29 yet. And he literally has produced tight end 4, tight end 7, and tight end 8 the last 3 years in points per game.
Yeah, so I am a little bit lower on that projection for Fannin. I do think he's more of your 12P Isaiah Likely type. Again, maybe in 3 years' time, that's a conversation we can have, similar to what we're having with Andrews now. But I do think, at least for the next couple of years, you're looking at a guy that last year, basically 9 targets per game, 97 targets in 11 games played. Year before, 123 targets in 16 games as a tight end. Like, if this guy stays healthy, yeah, sure, maybe he doesn't have tight end 1 overall upside because Trey McBride and Brock Bowers exist. But who's to say he can't finish as the tight end 3 next year?
Yeah, no, it's definitely possible, especially if Flacco or whatever other quarterback is going to play games for them can function the offense. So those are kind of like the veteran pieces. If you were just a full status contender and you had the 208, 209 because you got out in the first round last year or something like that, you could trade for Aaron Jones, Matthew Stafford, Mark Andrews, Geno Smith, Calvin Ridley, or David Njoku. But if you're just looking at this range and you think that there's better young players available that you can just pivot into, let's say you're not high on Scatabo, you're not high on Tootin, you're not high on Kyle Williams, you're not high on Jack Besh or Trey Harris, or whatever one you were high on already went off the board before your pick. I think Josh Downs and Jaden Reed are 2 young wide receivers that you should be able to get for this price tag, especially after the Colts and the Packers respectively draft a first-round skill position player in Tyler Warren and Matthew Golden. Josh Downs might still be the best target earner on that team, even despite Pittman's presence, despite Tyler Warren being added. I just think he's such a great player, man. You look at what he was able to produce last year with terrible quarterback play in Anthony Richardson and honestly the worst of Joe Flacco for the most part. I think Josh Downs is just such a good player, man. You don't often get a 23-year-old who has 13.1 fantasy points per game. Again, keep in mind, there's guys going way higher than Josh Downs in fantasy, like Zay Flowers, for example, who produce less than this from a point per game standpoint at the same age. And Josh Downs is like, what, mid-30s wide receiver in Dynasty, late 30s wide receiver in Dynasty versus Zay Flowers, even though I love Zay Flowers, more like an early 20s guy. So I think you're getting a value on him. And same goes for Jaden Reed. Yeah, he was volatile. Yeah, he's a slot receiver, but I still think Golden actually, it's kind of the Amon-Ra situation where Golden kind of helps him out a little bit because he has 4.29 speed, and Jaden Reed can still be the clear out yards after catch, big play guy. And especially in Dynasty best ball leagues, like he gives, he has big time production some weeks. So I think Jaden Reed and Josh Downs, if you're not super high on some of these receivers, especially Williams, Besh, and Harris, just see what you can get. See if you can get to those guys straight up.
I mean, Reed at one point was a guy we were talking about as potentially a top 15 dynasty wide receiver. And that point was literally at the beginning of last year. Literally at the beginning of last year, when you watched week 1, week 2, week 3, we were talking about the fact that this guy could be, having a Deebo Samuel level efficiency season. And then it all just kind of went to shit. And I do think with Jordan Love healthy, maybe Jaden Reed was banged up last year for all we know. I do think there's a possibility with Matthew Golden added that this entire Packers passing attack does improve. And that's also why I have Tucker Kraft listed here. Tucker Kraft is a guy in his second year this past year, for looking at the point per game basis, 163.3 PPR points in 17 games. He's the tight end 10 in fantasy, 707 yards and 7 receiving touchdowns on 70 targets. We saw that as a big time jump from year 1, 40 targets in year 1, 70 targets in year 2. Yeah, they drafted Musgrave in the second round, Kraft in the third, but it's very clear after this past year that Tucker Kraft is the clear tight end 1 for the Packers. And as he keeps developing in the context of this Packers offense, we've already seen that Jordan Love trusts him. 24-year-old tight end in this range, realistically, like we've said, there's just such a weird gap right now between the Warren and Loveland range, where we have those guys as top 5, top 6 tight ends, and the, like you said, Fannin, Taylor, Ferguson range, where although I like them as, tight ends 13 to 15 in my rankings, Tucker Kraft's a guy I'd be willing to rank inside my top 10 at tight end. So there is a clear divide there.
Oh, absolutely. And if you look at Kraft's game logs a little closer too, like there was at least half the games last year where he was below like a 60% route participation. And knowing that he has proven himself and Musgrave has not, especially ability to stay healthy and, be productive on the field. You look at some of the games where he's over a 60% route rate. Week 4 against Minnesota, he was tight end 1 on the week that week. Next game against Los Angeles Rams, 24.8 PPR points, also tight end 1 on the week that week. His best season route participation was 91.7% rate against Houston in week 7. And he was, again, a top 12 tight end that week. So I think giving him the routes, like especially if we watch like preseason usage and that kind of thing for Kraft, I wouldn't be shocked if this time next year he's like the tight end 4 or 5 in Dynasty. Like he legitimately has that ability to climb up the depth chart. And I think between him, Golden, Jaden Reed, you have a nice young nucleus for Jordan Love to build around there. And I actually do think that Reed and Kraft are being undervalued because of the addition of Golden. And not that I don't think Golden can be the number one receiver, absolutely do. But it also wouldn't shock me if either of these two guys outproduced Golden year one.
Yeah. And the other guy that I have in this range is Trey Benson. A lot of upside with, again, for example, a guy like Byshal Tootin. I think straight head to head, Benson versus Tootin. You want to take Tootin? I think that's perfectly fine. I think I would also take Tootin. But after Tootin is off the board specifically, even when it comes to as much I like Scadaboo, as much I like, Dylan Sampson, who we'll talk about in a little bit, if I can trade them in for Trey Benson, who I had as a clear top 2 running back last year, and guess what? The other one in that range is irrelevant in Dynasty now with 2 ACL tears and Jonathan Brooks. Sign me up. The reason why we were high on Trey Benson going into the Arizona Cardinals situation is that we didn't believe in the long-term health of James Conner. And it made us look foolish at the beginning of last year. The first 16 games, James Conner was healthy. James Conner was a workhorse. James Conner looked good. What happened in week 17, Corey?
He went down with an injury.
And he has not finished a single season in, I believe, the last 3 or 4 years of his career. So you're looking at a guy, which actually, I don't even know if he's ever finished a full season. You can double check, fact check me on that. I don't think James Conner has ever finished a full 17-game season. So when you're looking at the situation here, Trey Benson, 220-pound size, legitimate speed, tackle breaking ability, elusive as all hell. He's got a 3-down capability in this backfield behind a running back that we don't believe in the health of long-term, that is going to be past the touch and age apex at the running back position, which you have all the history on, you have all the data on, and he's still the same prospect that I saw last year. The fact that we're getting a discount on him when he has the same exact upside case that he did going into last year is baffling. And if you can get him for the 210 after paying 202, 203 price tags last year, sign me up.
Yeah, this was always the risk with Trey Benson because he was a raw prospect and he kind of did need to sit and learn from a veteran like James Conner, which happened. And again, it was a poor run out because best case scenario would have been James Conner goes down week 11, week 12, and then we get to see Trey Benson be the lead back for a number of weeks. But he did have a couple things break right for him. Number one, they didn't address the running back position at all in the NFL draft, which means they do believe in Trey Benson because if they had drafted a 3rd-round running back, that wouldn't have been good for Benson. However, they did extend James Conner, which also does kind of hurt Trey Benson's long-term outlook. But here's the thing. James Conner is over 1,600 career touches and 30 years old. So he's either going to go down with an injury at this point in his career because that's just what the history suggests when you're 30 years old with this many touches under your belt, or we're going to see Trey Benson kind of pull a Tank Bigsby where he just looks much better than he did as a rookie because Trey Benson admittedly didn't look that great when he got opportunities this year, but he was
4.6 yards a carry.
A raw prospect.
4.6 yards a carry, 9.8 yards per target. It wasn't like he was inefficient or anything. Like he was efficient on his touches. It's just when he didn't look good, it was like, oh, he missed a cutback lane, or oh, he didn't pick up this blitz. Like he was doing the rookie stuff, but in terms of just specifically running the football, catching the ball out of the backfield, like the efficiency is fine. 4.6, like I said, 9.83 yards per target. And then like we mentioned in terms of the James Conner contract, yeah, technically he did get extended, but they have an out after this year, potential out 2026, and they would only eat $2.2 million in dead cap. So if Conner, whether he regresses as a player, maybe he gets injured again this year, it's tough for me not to envision the Cardinals giving the range to Trey Benson going into 2026.
Yeah, because like I said, if they didn't want to do that, they would have addressed the running back position in the draft, in my opinion, pretty highly. And Benson only had 2 games last year where he had 10 or more touches, and he was a top 24 running back in both of those games. Yeah. Because Conner, I believe in both of those games, ended up leaving early or hitting the medical tent for a certain period of time. But regardless, I think we could see at this point in this, midpoint in the season or whatever, whether it's a changing of the guard in the backfield, Benson looks like the better back. Maybe it's James Conner going down with an injury or getting banged up or whatever. Regardless, his projection was always more year 2, year 3 anyways. And people, devaluing him for that, knowing that that was the case going into his rookie season, is just a little bit overreactive. Should he lose a little bit of value based on what you spent on him last year? Probably, because it was always possible that he just won the backfield as a rookie. But we all knew James Conner was a good running back.
Hey, and if you guys are fans of the Flock League, you'll know Trey Benson, absolute league winner.
Yeah, he was not a league winner for Danny in that situation. But
this year, 2025, baby.
Yeah, we never wrong, just early. 211, 212. So these late 2nd-round picks. The reason you guys might be wondering, why do you have it split up 201 to 204, 205 to 210, and then 211, 212? It's the way we have the rookies ranked. like we said, we went through last tier was, Tootin and Milrow and Scatabo and all those guys. They're in the same tier in our rookie rankings consensus wise. And same goes for like the 211, all the way really to like the 302, 303. But the 211, 212 specifically among second round picks is the Mason Taylor, Harold Finn, and Jake Ferguson tier of the tight ends. The wide receiver wise, you're looking at Jalen Knoll. Sorry, I said did I say Jake Ferguson? Yeah.
We'll talk about Jake Ferguson in a second.
Jalen Knoll, Io Manor, probably the types of wide receivers you're looking at. And then Dylan Sampson, who Danny mentioned, he actually has in the tier above, but I have him in the tier below. So consensus-wise, he balances out to here. I'll go through my guys here. I think if you're looking for competitive dudes, I really think Brian Robinson and Isaiah Pacheco are going to be like RB2s this year in terms of fantasy production. Are RB2s needle-moving producers? No, but you and I play in deeper leagues where...
At this cost?
At this cost, they can be functional guys. Brian Robinson's a capable 8 to 10 touchdown guy. Same goes for Isaiah Pacheco, and they didn't have any backfield competition added. Krosky Merritt and Brashard Smith in the 7th round don't really scare me as far as what they're going to do to Brian Robinson and Isaiah Pacheco's workload. So Brian Robinson's going to split with Eckler and Pacheco's going to split with Hunt, but I do think that they'll generally be the starting running backs, especially knowing that how banged up these two guys were last year. We've kind of soured our opinion on them. And then Keon Coleman, I just think similar to Trey Benson, we knew going into the season he was a raw projection and he needed some time. And the Bills, likewise, didn't really add much at the wide receiver position. They extend Khalil Shakir. They still have, Dalton Kincaid at tight end, who I also have in this range. And then they also, lose Amari Cooper in free agency and don't really replace him. So Kyle Pitts and Dalton Kincaid, I also have listed here. This is simply for the fact that if you were going to take a tight end here, Mason Taylor, Terrence Ferguson, Harold Fannin, whatever, if you're a contending team because you have the 211, 212 and you won the championship or came second in the league or something like that, and you wanted a tight end, I don't think it's outrageous to say that Kyle Pitts and Dalton Kincaid might be better bets for you as a contender than taking a rookie tight end in Mason Taylor and Terrence Ferguson, who are not, elite prospects by any means. They're streamer level prospects. Pitts and Kincaid both respectively were better prospects. Of course, we have multiple years of sample that's saying that they might not be the greatest players.
They might be urine.
They might be bad. But here's the thing. If Pitts and Kincaid can figure it out above the shoulders, both of them, they'll probably be really productive. Is there only a 30% chance or a 15% chance potentially that actually happens? Sure. But given the 211, 212 price tag, I as crazy as this sounds, I think I still might be in at that cost.
Yeah, I mean, Pitts, I am. Kincaid, I'm not. But like you said, it does suck the fact that we were calling Kyle Pitts 2 years ago the gold standard. I guess the gold color we were referring to is just urine because that's what he's been since we've said that. But yeah, I think that's reasonable. If you want to take one of those guys over a Mason Taylor, Harold Fannin, Terrence Ferguson type, I think that's perfectly reasonable.
I want to be out on these guys, to be clear. I want to be out on them. This price tag is not bad. If you have to pay more, like if you have to pay 204 for these guys, then don't do that. I'm saying if it's like a late second, early third round pick, Dalton Kincaid and Pitts are going like after pick 135 on Underdog right now. Nobody believes in these guys. Not that you should. I'm just saying they're still young and tight end. If they were wide receivers, I'd be writing them off completely. They're done. But tight ends do tend to take a little bit longer to develop. So a year 4 tight end in Kyle Pitts, a year 3 tight end in Dalton Kincaid, I don't think it's outrageous to say that we could see a big jump from them.
They keep pulling us back in.
Yes.
Yes. But yeah, no, I agree with those calls. You mentioned Keon Coleman too, raw prospect going into year 2, tethered to Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills. If you want to re-roll, I think it would make sense, but realistically, there's a lot of prospect profiles that he'll have as being better than, like Keon Coleman was.
He's younger than every receiver going in this range too.
Yeah. It's a risk, but at the same time, he's headed to Josh Allen and he is 6'4" and can play on the outside. So like that, I'll start off. We mentioned some urine tight ends and full transparency, objectively, Jake Ferguson was urine this past year. Whether it was the injury problems, whether it was the context of the offense, Jake Ferguson, by his standard, had a terrible year. However, if you can get back to 2023 Jake Ferguson, the 211, 212 would be a steal. We're talking about a guy that year, 71 receptions, 102 targets, 761 receiving yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. The reason why I'm willing to be back in on Jake Ferguson, aside from the Cowboys jersey hanging behind me, is simply because of the Cowboys situation right now. CeeDee Lamb, he might get 180, 190, 200 targets. In fact, I would expect that to be the case. Outside of that, if Dak Prescott is healthy and he is able to get back to the 4,500 yard, 30 plus passing touchdown output that we've seen on a year-to-year basis, who the hell else is going to be catching passes? My best bet would be Jake Ferguson. He's flashed it before, 100 plus target upside. And I really do feel like last year was an anomaly. Not to mention little fiance buff. He actually proposed to, I believe, I don't know which Cavender twin he was dating, but they're engaged now. So maybe, husband strength, we start seeing him get back to the level. But all jokes aside, it's really just banking on the fact that we saw the elite level production before. And after one bad year, if you can get a depressed cost at the 212, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, Jake Ferguson, in my opinion, is just totally and utterly mid. But
last year he was. I'll give you credit. Last year he was.
He could be the second biggest target on his team, and it's a team that should have good passing output. So I get it.
What's stopping him from getting another 100 target season? Like Dak's going to throw the ball 600 times.
Yeah, I would rather trade for Kraft and just pay a little bit more. That would be my thought process on Jake Ferguson, but that's totally fine.
Younger, probably a little bit more proven to be better at this point. Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Way better athlete too.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfectly reasonable. So Jake Ferguson, I had to mention because we were talking about the urine tight end. So I had to mention the fact that, yes, he was urine last year. I'll take full accountability of that. My other guys that I have listed here, Tajay Spears, very simple, young running back. Tony Pollard, a little bit banged up this past year. I think we could potentially see a changing of the guard. Similar kind of situation to what I think with Trey Benson. Again, I don't think Tony Pollard, from an age and touch apex perspective, is maybe on the way out like a Connor, but maybe Tajay Spears can become the 1A rather than the 1B that he was this past year. Jawan Jennings is very interesting. You're either all in on Ricky Pearsall, and if you're not, you have to be in on Jawan Jennings. That's kind of where I found myself. Jawan Jennings was productive this last year. It is a little bit of a risk given his profile because he is an older player with only 1 year of sustained production. But like I said, if I'm not in on Ricky Pearsall, there is target opportunity in this situation. Brandon Ayuk shouldn't be healthy in week 1. Even if he is, he's probably not going to look like himself realistically. And outside of that, I mean, you got George Kittle, Deebo Samuel's out of the picture, and we'll wait and see on what the status of Christian McCaffrey is. But even if we're assuming he's playing, there's a lot of meat left on the bone for the other receivers in San Francisco, whether it's Pearsall, whether it's Jennings, to be able to take on the mantle. Stephon Diggs obviously goes to the New England Patriots, had the Drake May, veteran receiver, still had relatively good reception perception metrics this past season, filled that slot role for the Houston Texans. He's just a sustained target earner that Drake May can rely upon early on. I love Kyle Williams. I think he's a very good prospect, but at the same time, week 1, Stephon Diggs will be the unanimous number 1 for the New England Patriots. And then Deebo Samuel gets straight to the Washington Commanders. We could be concerned about potential target volume because obviously Jaden Daniels not going to throw the ball a ton comparatively to even what we saw. I mean, actually, Deebo's not used to situations where he's used to throwing the ball a lot because quite frankly, he's coming from the Niners. But regardless, though, Terry McLaurin's there. He could be the number 2 on that team. He has yak ability. You're not paying prime Deebo Samuel prices. You're paying back-end second prices for him.
Yeah, of all the guys that you have listed here, I think Deebo is 100% the one that I'm the most in on just because, I mean, Diggs is coming off a torn ACL. Even though I think Diggs, he's set to be back for week 1, and I'm sure he'll be on the field or whatever. Like, I'm a little worried about it. I mean, he's like 31 years old coming off a torn ACL, but Deebo Samuel, I'm really not that worried about his injury history. It's kind of just fluky ticky-tack stuff, which is the Deebo Samuel experience. It'll probably happen again where he misses 3 games this year and is in the medical tent every other play. But Deebo Samuel, when healthy, is a dude. We've seen league-winning production from this guy, and Terry McLaurin's a great receiver, but like Deebo Samuel might be better. Like, it's possible that Deebo is the number 1 here. Like, I don't think it's out of the range of outcomes that Deebo outproduces him for fantasy this year, maybe combined rushing and receiving or whatever the case is. So I really just want pieces of this offense like everybody probably does.
Yeah, the way that would work for me is probably similar to what happened in 2023 for Deebo. 15 games, he had about 890 yards, also contributed 225 on the ground. If he can give you that type of production where he's giving you 800 to 900 or even 800 to 1,000 in the air and giving you between 200 and 400 on the ground, 10 multi-purpose touchdowns on a year for an equatable late second of cost, you're getting your bang for your buck.
Yeah, and we talked about the schematic fit when it came to what Deebo represented for this Commanders offense, who fed Austin Eckler and Zach Ertz targets short areas of the field. You give those targets to Deebo Samuel, they're probably going a lot further. And that season that you just outlined of Deebo Samuel might not sound that spectacular to some people. 800 yards, 200 yards on the ground. He was wide receiver 12 in fantasy points per game that year. So, I mean, that's like 16.3 PPR points per game was 2 years ago for Deebo Samuel. In a season, he missed 2 games. And that's literally better than anything Terry McLaurin's done in his career.
Yeah, 12 multi-purpose touch, 5 rushing touchdowns for a receiver, by the way, might be one of the most absurd stats I've seen, but
Right.
that's what Deebo Samuel does. He is not your typical receiver. He is a unicorn in that aspect. The Washington Commanders didn't just trade him to say, hey, go line up as the X wide receiver, win outside every single rep. No, he's going to be playing in the slot. He's going to get reps out of the backfield. He's going to get supplemented targets in the flats. He's going to be able to gain a lot of space touches on this team. And for a team that is as dynamic, when you have a guy like Jaden Daniels in the backfield, they can't focus on Deebo Samuel when Jaden Daniels is a 4-3 threat to take it 60 yards to the house.
Yeah, exactly. So we covered pretty much everything in this video, trading second round picks for veterans, whether you're looking for straight up contending assets like a Chris Godwin, a Terry McLaurin, a Derrick Henry, a Devontae Adams, an Aaron Jones, a Matthew Stafford, Deebo Samuel, Stephon Diggs, guys that we just talked about, or you're looking for guys that maybe you're not high on this range in the rookie class and you want to invest in a Chuba Hubbard, you want to invest in a Josh Downs or a Jaden Reed, or a Tucker Kraft or a Trey Benson or a Tajay Spears or Keon Coleman, somebody like that. So kind of give you a little bit of everything in this video. Again, this was essentially from the buyer's standpoint, which is we're trading away our second round picks. This is what we are looking to get in return for our second round picks. We will have tomorrow for you the seller's frame of mind, which is we like the second round rookies. We're going to try and buy second round picks. We are selling veterans for these second round picks, and we'll talk about that, of course, in tomorrow's video. I just want to make that clear again, because some people did kind of muddy up what frame of mind we're talking about when we're going through these. If you are buying veterans for second round picks, you're probably contending.
Absolutely. And again, we have to generalize it as much as we can. We're going to get comments specifically about your own micro league markets. That wouldn't fly in my market. That wouldn't fly. We're trying to generalize it as much as we can. Some of you guys will play in leagues where they value veterans extremely highly. On the inverse, some of you will play in sicko leagues where picks are all that matters. Just understand that in the comment section. We are trying to balance both frames of mind.
Yeah, and to give you guys a range, for example, in a sicko league, Derrick Henry might go for the 201 to 203. In a casual league, he might go for the 109 to 112. That's basically the difference we're kind of outlining here. The reason we give these guys as, opportunities for trades, if you can get them for any cheaper than this, that's obviously great news. But if you have to pay more, they might not be as good of trade targets. So again, ask us questions down below in the comments. If you have a trade offer on the table, we'd be happy to help you out there. But if you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe. Comment down below any of your thoughts. If you guys want our dynasty trade value chart, which is basically why we're doing this video series, outlining exactly what we would trade for certain players. You can also use our trade calculator over on flockfantasy.com. You can get access to both of those things by heading to the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment. Use the promo code FSE to sign up, and you'll get 6 months for free if you sign up annually. And you'll also get a free team review, so we can give you guys advice on your rookie drafts and all that kind of stuff. If you sign up annually, you get a free voucher as an annual mother flocker using code FSE, as I mentioned. We have a couple in the hopper right now. Probably a day or two, we'll do like another live stream breaking those down. So if you guys are waiting on a review, let us know if you need them before then, but we will get to those very soon for you. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.